I welcome you all to the first Hindustan Times Shine HR Summit that brings together policy and corporate leaders to examine how to drive productivity in the Indian workplace by harnessing individual and organizational productivity. We now have 4 industry leaders join us for an interaction. To moderate the session, we have with us the author, columnist, blogger and editor HT Business, Mr. Gautam Chikkermane.
First, my objection to the word harnessing talent. We are not dealing with horses and dogs to try and talk about harnessing. If you were to attend a session called Harnessing Your Kids, how would you feel about it? Small subunit of management starts at home. And if you reflect closely how the management architecture has changed at home, you will have a lot of answers on how can you get the best out of talent. The way my father used to handle me by saying, this is what I want, and it better be done by this time. And the way I handle my kids is by collaboration, by participation, by involvement, by giving them equal stake on the table. When you come back to office, that is not the way we behave. We still behave in that old command and control fashion. And therefore, the first aspect of talent management or harnessing talent or whatever word you use is to understand that life has changed, aspirations changed, people have changed, and therefore you have to change, and therefore you have to start asking all the right questions.
If you want a new India in 2022, if you want a productive and sustainable, competitive India, I think the onus is on industry to lead the change. The government has given you this opportunity, and I think the time to act is now. I think the skill sets, what you're talking about here, so if you had leadership, great. Leadership quality, it actually worked. If you projected a leader, it worked. Second is that the ability to create an organization structure right from the grassroots till the top and align the entire organization to the same vision and not have discordance.
The way we look at talent itself has changed over the past 10 years. And it is increasingly rapidly changing at a much faster pace today because we see technology bringing in a lot of change in attitudes, in the way we work, in the way we communicate, and so on.
Employee satisfaction surveys, which we do once a year, and we give it a lot of credence. My suggestion is don't. If we couldn't predict the exit polls right, do you think we can predict employee satisfaction right? So therefore, the satisfaction changes every day.
Fully in tune with everything that you say as far as employment is concerned, except the fact that when you say that education is equal to job. So I think very often education is just...
There is knowledge. I'm not disputing that element at all. And I think there's a large element of the population that looks at education in order to find a job.
I think there is very interesting thing about the aspirational quotient. Everybody wants to become a graduate. But if all 700 million people become graduates, the aspirations, the job levels in the industry skill pyramid collaborative cannot accommodate that many graduates. So you have to look at different solutions going forward.
We have a whole bunch of educated people, and the delusion is these guys are good for employment. Why don't people who are points of who can create leverage, raising this in an effective manner and the government listening to you people?
There is a need to make changes on that front. 90% of our education is bookish and knowledge, whereas 90% of the industry requirement is vocational skills. The aspect of addressing the education pipeline is something that there is an open and continuous dialogue happening on. And it's very policy driven, so there's a governmental intervention and involvement required. But the short-term solution to that is getting involved in skill redevelopment or development, which makes people ready for a job.
Today, there is a huge gap in talent available vis-a-vis skills required by the industry-academia partnership. What method do you propose to bridge the gap?
Is every company spending 5% of their revenue on vendor development? And if they were, and you look at the total revenue size of listed companies in Bombay Stock Exchange or National Stock Exchange, you have a huge surplus which education institutions will not be able to digest. The second is, How do we solve the problem? Do we solve the problem by educating people in what we call deployable or employable skill, or defining certification courses?
The problem is that given the nature of the education system in India, the schooling system, the AICT, the engineering colleges, etc., it tends to get fragmented. And I think industry has to ensure that you work collaboratively, and you don't say that, I as a company will work with one space and the others could work with the other space, because that will only increase and accelerate the problem which is there.
Do you think job rotation is a very good idea to retain people? Do companies really encourage this in their organizations?
There are a lot of times where employees will are pretty clear about what track they want to follow. And it becomes clearer as they get on in terms of years of experience. The idea is to keep communicating. Whoever is your mentor or your coach or your supervisor should actually be constantly communicating with what your aspirations are. If that continues to happen, there is clarity that is driven in the mind of the employee. What being a technically or a subject matter expert can do to his or her career, and what being a generalist can do to his or her career. And a lot of companies are actually encouraging job rotations, whether it's line business, business to function, and that's how you will develop skills all around.
Are people today, in the restructuring of the way organizations function, want all-rounders in every function?
If you hire heroes, you get zeros. If you hire people who have aspirations that they are going to build up that last 20%, you create a great team.
How can organizations motivate the mentors to take their role of mentor seriously? What is in it for them to devote time and energy towards mentoring?
We ask the rarest of commodities of the mentors, which is their time. It has to be driven as part of the people vision or the people strategy of every organization, and that's what distills great organizations from the others. There is no other way to motivate mentors. The only way they can get motivated is self-motivation, and having seen a success track record of mentoring actually having worked well for the business, for business results, and therefore for people as well. Even in a reviving economy like the United States, the fact is that over the next 5 to 7 years, 80 million baby boomers, who are large part of their working population, will actually retire. There are only 40 million what you call Gen Xers now, who are ready to step up to take their place. In China, our experience has been that we actually try and advise clients to go in for serious succession planning, primarily because most Chinese organizations, even if you are multinational organizations in China, need you or prefer you to be of Chinese origin, and you must know the language. That is fast going out of the window, because the number of Chinese or Americans or any other folks of Chinese origin who wanted to come back to the mainland has run dry. There is such a huge gap in terms of filling up those positions as you go up the organization, that we are actually advising clients to seriously look at succession planning and not, get into this exercise every time of going out to fill that position. I think we are at a much better place, and the only reason I say that is we firmly believe most of our talent is socially adaptable. It has good access to the one binding language that we use for business across the world. It still is a big advantage. The Western expats are actually looking at Asia because this is where growth is for them, and if they have a few years left, this is where they will, make their little pot of gold.
The companies could spend a lot of money searching for the right talent. Any specific you want to say how that time to react went down?
So one of the things that we've experimented with a couple of companies is bucketed hiring. So I'll give you the example of a company we worked with. There's a benchmark of a particular quality that they want to get. So we said that can we break the benchmark of quality into discrete measurable parameters. And for each of the parameters, can we look at what is the hiring grade, what is immediately trainable, and what is midterm and what is long term. So we bucketed people scientifically into these buckets. Intelligent thing that this company did was they used people on the production floor, they used training, and they got people in talent acquisition together to define these benchmarks extremely accurately. So by doing this, they actually managed to move from about 100 hires to about 400 hires.
If you want leaders to really lead this growth, lead this enrichment, the kind of leaders we need are the ones who are probably innovative, who are really looking at newer ways of growth, coming up with newer solutions, newer products, different things to really grow, because after some time, whatever you're doing is going to kind of end at a maturity. So you've got to come up with new things. You've got to really have people who are, thinking out of the box, working with a different kind of ecosystem to grow. You also need people who are more global in their own approach. And the third big one is really all about scale. How do I really grow big scale? How do we really grow leaders? And if I look at leaders, how do I make innovative leaders, leaders who've got a global mindset and who who can manage scale?
How does retail industry specifically put value on talent acquisition?
There has to be a sustained skill continuum, which is shown to the individual from the moment the individual enters at the lowest level in retail company to a certain next supervisory level. And that continuum scale has to be built. And around that skill continuum, I think there could be milestones towards which the individual is directed, which helps in continuous skill building and an engagement with the employee through that process, which helps the individual also move up, develop skills, be more relevant at different levels in the organization and in retail company, and ensures that organization invests in doing so.
Every employee can be an innovator. What is the balance you look for when recruiting in terms of skill sets when innovation is not available?
So I think you can do innovation in many things, even small improvements in what you do, your processes, ideas, etc. So I think innovation is everywhere. I think the competency is needed for creating an enterprise, a discontinuity, which is really all about taking the organization to a new level. That's something which will have to be built over time, and it's not just being creative, but it needs people who firstly are creative, who are able to work using technology and within the ecosystem. Also working with partners to make the results happen. So it's not just coming up with an idea, but thinking about it, having the right kind of commercial kind of model around it and making it and monetize it. So I think it's a tougher one. And that's the competency that I don't think many people have. So you've got to build them. And that I think you don't need all of them to have. I think that you need a few people to have. And they have to go through the right experiences of really taking risks, of being in turnaround situations, of actually working with different partners and being exposed to the external environment. Those then make a few people leaders who will really create the innovative growth for you.
How are PSUs reacting to this competitive market and talent acquisition? I mean, the way we understand PSUs, they are very structured, bureaucracy and all. How are they reacting and they bringing a change to it?
In public sector, when we started, let us see why we started. We started, it should create employment, we should contribute, but no question of asking anyone performance management. Because my money was coming from the government. I was getting the budgetary support. Whatever money I spent, it comes from the government. Suddenly, one day we were asked, no further budgetary support, please be on your own. What we did, I take the example of my own company, why to go others. Today we are a Maharatna company and we were operating, please take it, 4 million tons of production with 2.5 lakhs of people. From that, today we are producing 14 million tons with 1.1 lakh. In 2 years' time, we will be 23 million tons, 4 million tons with 90,000 to 1 lakh people. So it is all happening from within. When we were thrown into this, there are certain restructuring which took place. Our people are, if not better, as good as anywhere else. Today, last 10 years we are giving a profit which is in the range of 6 to 7,000 crores. So this is the efficiency which has been built up. There is nothing wrong in the public sector. What is required is a level playing.
Elizabeth, you represent a retail chain, which again is very close to our hearts in the sense of what Fabindia stands by. So how do you link that? What are the elements of employer brand for Fabindia?
Thank you, Esther, for letting me know that Fabindia is close to your heart. That exactly is what our employer branding has been able to achieve with not just people outside, that is our customers, but people within the organization. We strive to ensure that when people say, I belong to Fabindia, they truly mean what they're saying, that they have a sense of ownership for what the company is all about.
Yashan, I'm just moving this side of the table. Alok was talking about employee experience, about how the business is evolving. Philips itself has evolved so much. How is that evolution translates in employer brand? What are the elements that you've built as an employer brand?
Well, it's an evolution which happens, you know. I don't think so every decade, but even every 5 years, okay? And the way we look at it, when we started as a company just making filament, you know, lamps way back in 1981 in a factory in Eindhoven in Netherlands, to becoming the biggest lighting company in the world today, to becoming one of the biggest lighting companies in the healthcare today, of course in the diagnostic and the equipment space, not in pharmaceuticals, but healthcare. And fast, you know, still continuing to be one of the biggest companies in consumer lifestyle and consumer entertainment. It's a journey, okay? And what you have to do is, and what we do is, we continuously keep measuring our employer value proposition. But employer brand, when it comes in Philips, we specifically look at it, that's something that you create for your existing employees, for the extended families of the employees, for the talent which is in schools and colleges today, which is going to come into the workforce, which could be our employees. So that's what the connotation of an employer brand for us is.
How BPO is changing perception to be able to attract people? Because there is, I mean, the question implies that there is a lack of attractiveness of the industry. So that's the first one. And the second one is, when you have such a high attrition, how do you keep on going and going, executing a plan when you kind of restarting fresh again and again and again? So if you can combine both questions.
The reality on the ground is that career decisions or a decision to join a industry or an organization is not necessarily taken by the individuals or the young folks. And I think that's what typically happens. BPO in the list of priorities perhaps is right at the bottom of that pile, if you like. Reality also is that the folks many a times who walk into our premises or in the premises of I guess any BPO within the country, they are actually in a grazing or a browsing mode that, yeah, I'm here today, am I really looking at coming back here tomorrow? And it's a function of what they hear, what they see, how they experience it. So there is perhaps a 10% of the entire group that walks in, they're actually testing it out. What you do speaks so loudly that I can't hear what you say. So just saying is not enough. So what you do speaks so loudly that I can't hear what you say. So in the end, the experience of those folks and the fact that, let me share an example. In a lot of our learning programs, we used to earlier bring in a senior leader who would do what you typically term as executive signaling and, let people hear about how they're going to benefit and, they must apply what they learn. We've changed it to bringing in actually a frontline person. We've changed it to bringing in someone who went through that same experience maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 months ago, applied and got the benefits. And what we see is, that's an immediate validation of what is being done out there.
When the product brand is going to vanish, what would be the fate of an employee whose employment bonding is also going to be vanished? What would be the role of the employer branding then?
It's a case where perhaps when we were talking of challenges, Esther talked to Elizabeth, I think a similar kind of challenge can also come in the life of a corporate, because there are good times, there are bad times, there are sunny days, there are rainy days. And I think why we go far, 8-9 was one such year which shook the industry globally. All global economies faced that deep recession. India only faced a slowdown, but still we reacted very badly. Now we are talking of employer branding. You are raising this one specific question of a product vanishing. I am saying the business is getting challenged, right? 8-9, the businesses got challenged. So what do? I think what we did at Maruti when we talk of employer branding, every such adverse business circumstances will also offer a silver lining provided we identify it. Maruti identified that companies were refusing their promises at the campuses, negotiating salaries to go down at the campuses. We aggressively went for campus hiring at that point of time as per original plan, original schedule, same compensation, same respect, same numbers. The second perspective is we invested heavily in training at that point of time. Now what happened in the process? Strong HR leadership emerged as a protector, positive, supportive, high credibility for Maruti. So campuses who were not interested to invite Maruti, like MDI Gurgaon, they used to say that you can't afford us. Prior to 8-9, were requesting Maruti to kindly come to the campus because employer image went up. So not only, as Elizabeth said, making promises and fulfilling, but also consistently handling even crisis situations with the same values, with the same care, if we are going to talk of employer branding. We were fastest to recover back the business within 4 months of that 8-9 crisis. And during that stage, we only requested for people to go for stretch role, creativity, suggestions. So 185,000 implemented suggestions and 148 crores of net saving to the company without any downsizing. That's the way perhaps you will have to look at this challenge. It's very easy to react. Product vanish, sack the employee. We don't need them, bench them. It's very easy. If any person can do it, then where is the kind of HR credibility? Where is the leadership perspective? Where is you walk the talk?
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.